Love is a funny thing. When you're in it, you believe it's unbreakable. You tell yourself that what you have is different from everyone else, that your relationship is stronger, deeper, more real than the ones that fall apart. You believe that no matter what, the two of you will always find a way to make it work. That's what I believed about us. I thought we had something solid, something that would last a lifetime. But looking back, I realize now that I was the only one who truly believed in it. She didn't. And the signs were always there, I just refused to see them. From the moment I met her, she became my world. I was never the type to fall easily. I had always been careful with love, never rushing into things. But with her, it was different. She had this effortless way of pulling me in. She made me laugh like no one else. She made even the smallest moments feel special. She made me feel like I had finally found my person. And because of that, I gave her everything. I always put her first. If she needed me, I was there, no matter how exhausted I was, no matter what I had to sacrifice. I paid attention to the little things, always making sure she felt appreciated. My life, my choices, my future plans, they all revolved around her. And for a long time, I thought she did the same for me. But that was the illusion. That was the lie I told myself. The truth? She never made me her priority. She just enjoyed being mine. Looking back, the cracks were always there. Not huge, not obvious, just little things I ignored because I didn't want to believe she wasn't as invested as I was. She never went out of her way for me the way I did for her. I planned surprises, date nights, thoughtful gestures. She'd say, "That's sweet," but never reciprocated. When I was struggling, she was supportive, but from a distance. She'd say the right words, but there was no real effort. She was easily distracted. If something more exciting came along, a party, a chance to be with other people, she wouldn't think twice about canceling on me. At the time, I convinced myself that this was just who she was, that she still loved me, just in her own way. But now I see it for what it really was. She liked having me, but she never really valued me. And that was the difference. People always ask, was it sudden or did it happen over time? The truth? Both. She had always been like this. But for the longest time I didn't feel it because she was still affectionate, because she still said, "I love you," because she still acted like we were a team. But at some point things started shifting. She started taking longer to respond to my texts. Hours would pass without a word, even when I knew she wasn't busy. She started canceling plans more often, with excuses that felt more like afterthoughts than real reasons. She started acting like being with me was an obligation instead of something she wanted. And when I confronted her, she'd say, "You're overthinking things." And I believed her. Because when you love someone, you don't want to believe they're pulling away. You want to believe things will go back to how they were. But deep down, I think I always knew. She was already halfway out the door. She just hadn't told me yet. The moment it really hit me wasn't a big fight. It wasn't some dramatic scene. It was something simple, a small moment that told me everything I needed to know. We were sitting at dinner one night. I was telling her about something important to me, a project I had been working on for months. I was excited, passionate, expecting her to be engaged the way she used to be. But she wasn't. She was barely listening. Her eyes kept flicking to her phone. She kept checking notifications, barely nodding along to what I was saying. And in that moment, I knew that I felt myself deflate mid-sentence, and when I finally stopped talking, she didn't even notice. She just looked up and said, "Oh, sorry, what were you saying?" And in that moment, it hit me like a truck. I wasn't her priority anymore. I was just background noise. For the first time, I couldn't lie to myself about it. That night, something in me shifted. I realized that I had spent years making her the center of my world while she had slowly, quietly pushed me to the side of hers. And no matter how much I loved her, love wasn't enough. 'Cause love should be reciprocal. Love should be effort on both sides. Love should never make you feel like you're begging for attention from the person who's supposed to care about you the most. And when she said those final words the next day, "You're not my priority anymore," it didn't even surprise me. Just confirmed what I had already known for a long time. And that was the moment I decided I would never make her a priority again either. Some people think the worst part of a breakup is the fight before the end, the shouting, the accusations, the ugly truths thrown back and forth. But sometimes the worst endings don't come with a fight. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is say nothing at all. 'Cause silence is final. And when she looked at me that night and said, "You're not my priority anymore," something inside me clicked into place. Not in anger, not in sadness, not even in regret, just clarity. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to ask her to explain herself. I was just going to disappear. And the next morning I did. After she said it, she went back to scrolling through her phone like it was nothing. Like she hadn't just told me flat out that I was no longer important to her. I sat there for a moment, staring at her, wondering, how the hell had I been so blind for so long? I wanted to ask, when? When did I stop mattering to you? Did you ever really love me? Are you even aware of what you just said? But I already knew the answer. She wasn't. She was checked out. And that realization hit me like a punch to the gut. For the first time, I saw it. Really saw it. I wasn't her person anymore. Hell, I wasn't even an afterthought. I was just there. So I got up. Quietly. She barely noticed. And that was when I knew for sure I could leave right now and she wouldn't even care that I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me. At some point, I turned my head to look at her, just watching. I tried to remember the last time I felt truly close to her. The last time she looked at me like she was happy I was there that I couldn't remember. And that was enough for me. So, at 5 a.m., while the world was still quiet, I got up and started packing my things. Not in anger. Not in heartbreak. Not in a rush. Just calmly. Methodically. Deliberately. Every shirt. Every book. Every single trace of my existence in her life gone. I left the keys on the counter. Left my name off the lease. Left her world as easily as she had left mine. And by the time the sun came up, I was already gone. She didn't notice right away. Not when she woke up. Not when she went about her morning routine like everything was fine. It wasn't until hours later, when she finally checked her phone, that she saw my message. "You don't have to worry about me being your priority anymore. I'm gone." She called. I didn't answer. She texted. I didn't respond. Because for the first time ever, she wasn't my priority anymore either. First, she didn't believe it. She thought I was bluffing. She texted things like, "Are you seriously doing this? This is childish. You're overreacting." But I wasn't. Because you can't overreact to someone who's already written you off. Then, as the reality set in, her messages changed. "We should talk about this. Let's figure things out. Why are you shutting me out?" But by then, it was too late. She had already shut me out long before I ever walked away. People say that leaving someone is hard. That you feel regret, sadness, doubt. That you wonder if you made the right choice. But here's the truth. The hardest part isn't leaving. It's realizing you should have left a long time ago. The moment I closed the door behind me, I expected to feel something, guilt, pain, and ache to go back. But all I felt was relief. Like I had finally put down a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. And as I drove away, watching that chapter of my life shrink in the rearview mirror, I realized something. I didn't just leave her behind. I left behind the version of me who would ever tolerate being second place to someone who should have loved me first. And That was the most freeing moment of my life. Because when I walked away from her that morning, I knew I wasn't just leaving a relationship, that I was leaving more than just a relationship. I was leaving a version of myself that tolerated being treated like an afterthought. There was no yelling, no dramatic fight, no last-minute pleas or desperate apologies. Just silence. And that silence, that was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Because when someone disappears without a trace, without a word, without a single look back, that's when you realize what you've lost. And for the first time, she had to live without me. First, she didn't believe it. The first few days, she kept calling, kept texting, kept trying to reach me like this was just some childish tantrum I was throwing. Are you done with this yet? Can you stop being dramatic and talk to me? So what, you're just ghosting me now? I ignored every single message. Because what was there to say? She had already made herself clear I wasn't a priority. And now she wasn't mine either. Weeks passed and the messages changed. They weren't frustrated anymore. They weren't dismissive or mocking. Now they sounded like regret. Can we talk? I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I miss you. But by then I had already learned the truth. She didn't miss me. She missed access to me. She missed having someone who always put her first. She missed having someone who loved her unconditionally, despite the way she treated me. She missed knowing that no matter what she did, I would always stay. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. For the first time in years, my life was fully mine again. I stopped making decisions around someone who never considered me. I started focusing on my own happiness, my own goals, my own future. I became stronger, sharper, completely free from her influence. And slowly, day by day, I started to feel alive again. Not just existing. Not just going through the motions. Not just trying to earn love from someone who never truly gave it, but actually living. I found new routines, new passions, new people who treated me like I actually mattered. And the more I grew, the more she faded from my mind. Then, about 4 months later, she reached out again. But this time, there was no arrogance in her words. No dismissive tone. Just quiet desperation. I don't know why I said what I did that night. I think I made a mistake. Can we meet? I looked at my phone, at the messages from the woman who once thought she could push me aside without consequences. And I smiled. Not because I was happy she regretted it. Not because I wanted her back. But because, for the first time, I felt nothing. She was just a memory now. A lesson. A chapter 1 had closed forever. I didn't answer. I didn't acknowledge her. I just deleted the messages and went back to my life. 'Cause I had already won. And she? She had lost the only man who ever truly loved her. For years, no one had truly cared about her. Then one day I saw her again, not because I was looking for her, not on purpose. It was just fate putting us in the same place at the same time. She was sitting alone in a cafe, staring at her phone with a distant, empty look. She looked older, not in appearance, but in a way that showed she had lived through some hard years. When she glanced up and saw me, I recognized it instantly, the rush of regret in her eyes. The realization that I was happy, thriving, and completely over her. She stood up like she wanted to say something, like she thought she still had a chance to explain. But I didn't give her one. I just smirked, nodded once, and walked away. No words. No emotions. No second glance, because some people don't deserve closure. They deserve to live with their mistakes. And that was the final lesson I ever gave her. Healing isn't just about moving on from the past. It's about building a future that makes the past irrelevant. For a long time after walking away from her, I didn't think about love. I focused on myself. I rebuilt my career. I found peace in being alone. I became the kind of man who would never let anyone treat him as second place again. I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't chasing it. And maybe that's why, when it finally came, it felt real in a way it never had before. Because this time, I didn't have to fight for it. I didn't have to prove my worth. I didn't have to beg to be a priority. With her, love wasn't something I had to earn. It was something freely given. I met Sophia at a mutual friends gathering. It wasn't a fairy tale moment, no sparks flying, no dramatic first encounter. Just a conversation that felt easy. She wasn't trying to impress me. She wasn't playing games. She wasn't making me guess whether I mattered to her. She was just real. And that was something I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I was talking to a woman who made me feel seen. Not as an option. Not as someone convenient. Not as a placeholder. But as someone who mattered. With her, there were no mixed signals. No nights spent wondering where I stood in her life. No unanswered texts. No effort I put in that wasn't reciprocated. She showed up. Not just in the big moments, but in the small ones. When I talked, she actually listened. When I made plans, she was excited, not indifferent. When she introduced me to her friends, she said, "This is him," with a smile that told me she had already chosen me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to wonder if I was enough. She made it clear every single day. Then, there was one moment that made everything click for me. It was a small thing. One of those days when life felt exhausting and overwhelming. Work was stressful. Meetings drained me. I was barely holding it together. And then, in the middle of the day, I got a message from her. "I know you've got a long day. Just wanted to remind you that I'm proud of you. Can't wait to see you later. Let me know if you need anything." It wasn't just the words. It was the thought behind them. She didn't need anything from me. She wasn't reaching out because she was bored or wanted attention. She was reaching out because she cared. Because she actually wanted to support me. And that was something I had never had before. Love shouldn't feel like a battle for validation. It shouldn't feel like a test you have to pass every day, and with Sophia it didn't. She made me feel safe, like I didn't have to constantly prove my worth. She made me feel valued, like everything I gave was appreciated, not just expected. She made me feel at home, like I had finally found the place I was meant to be. It was effortless. 'Cause real love isn't something you chase. It's something you step into when the right person finds you. One night, we were sitting on the couch just talking when out of nowhere she said something I'll never forget. "I just want you to know you'll never have to wonder if you're important to me. You'll never have to question how much I care about you." I looked at her, stunned. 'Cause those were the exact thoughts that had haunted me for years in my last relationship. The doubts, the insecurity, the exhaustion of being with someone who never made me a priority. And here she was, without even knowing it, erasing every single one of those fears. That's when I knew. She was it. She was everything I had been missing. Everything I had deserved all along. Years later, I found out that my ex had never really moved on. She had dated around, had a few relationships that never lasted, had even tried to rekindle things with me, only to realize I was already gone. And Sophia? Sophia had made me happier than I had ever been. She didn't just love me, she showed me what love was supposed to feel like. And for the first time, I was grateful. Grateful that my ex let me go. Grateful that I walked away before wasting another second on someone who never deserved me. Because in the end, I didn't just leave my past behind. I found a future that made it completely irrelevant. And that was the greatest ending I could have ever asked for.